Hello, and welcome to the MIT Open Documentary Lab Public Talk. Today we have Robert Hernandez, who I'm pleased to introduce, and my name is Sarah Wallace, and I'm the director of the MIT Open Documentary Lab. Robert is a web journalist and professor at the University of Southern California. He describes himself as a journalist of the web, not just on the web. He's a pioneer in journalism and technology with the goal of empowering people and informing reporting and storytelling, engaging community, improving distribution, and enhancing revenue. He and his students have won many awards, including Webbies and Shorties and Online News Association awards, and their work has been seen on major publications, Al Jazeera, New York Times, NBC. He's also dedicated to ensuring diversity in journalism. He created the Center of the Diversify Journalism Project and has served on numerous boards, including the Chicas Poderosas, the Online News Association, and the National Association of Hispanic Journalism. Today he's going to talk about his course that he created and leads, and he works with his students. They create nonfiction storytelling using emerging tech to disrupt journalism. So without further ado, Robert Hernandez.
Hello, everyone. I am going to turn on my keynotes, my share screen, and we'll talk through there. But I'll be monitoring the Q&A, so feel free to ask questions there as well as the chat. Let me call up the chat here just in case, but mainly let's focus the Q&A. This talk is okay to be totally engaging. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions. Like I said, I'll monitor that, but we'll also have a section at the end where the panelists, the participants, will get a first round of questions, and then we'll open it up to the public. First test of all this is hopefully you can hear me well and that you can see my screen. So hold on, let me, all right, here we go. So I can right now only see my Q&A and my screen. So if you are having issues, post it in the, hold on, let me just check one button over here. There you go. Cool, great. All right, here we go. So I'm talking about hijacking a dancing hot dog for the future of journalism. This is a different type of talk. It's not just a lecture. I'll talk about some stuff. Really, this is a proud pop-up professor talk, but it's also an interactive one. Of course, there's going to be questions, but to really understand the work that we're doing, I want you to download these apps. And the order of priority is YouTube. Make sure if you're on Android, you have the latest version of the YouTube app. Going on your phone on youtube.com is not going to work. So make sure you have the YouTube app. Make sure you have Snapchat. You may not have used it in a while, but go ahead and dust it off and get your username and password ready. Those are the two big ones that we're going to use today. I'll talk about something that we did on Snapchat. And if you want to see a better quality video, like the stuff that you'll experience, you can download our JOVRNALISM app. So make sure you're on your Wi-Fi as well. Don't use up your data. I am Robert Hernandez. I'm a digital journalism professor at USC here in Los Angeles. And you guys are sophisticated in a very different group that I'm talking to compared to other folks. You know, this is probably a volumetric capture, a photo scan, a 3D scan of myself, and it's kind of creepy to look at because I'm dead in my eyes. But this is a 3D model of me. I used to do this with all my students through our class. And what I do is I work with emerging technologies. I don't invent the tech. I see it on the horizon. If it hits a certain criteria that I'm looking for, I then incorporate it into my classroom and try to hijack it for storytelling. From 360 cameras to scanners to 3D printers to drones. I work with all this stuff to produce experiences, whether 360, AR, VR, things like that. Just for context, right? I'm at a journalism school, so I'm not at engineering or I'm not at cinematic arts. I'm in journalism, and most of my colleagues are fantastic, are legends, are incredible journalists, but they're technology has really been defined back in the 1800s. We can say 1400s, but let's say 1800s, when the printing press was mass produced. Then there was the antenna for broadcasting, but most of the technology that formed their platforms has been established decades, centuries ago. So they've had the privilege to focus strictly on content. How do they use the printed page? How do they use the broadcast over the air for video or audio to tell a story? My job is different. My job is to look at different types of printing presses, some legit, some passing by, maybe they're just a fad. But my job is to look at these different possible printing presses and see how I can incorporate them into journalism, into nonfiction storytelling. I want to prototype, I want to be the first draft of journalism in these platforms. And so while I work with a lot of media partners, traditional media brands, helping them embrace these technologies, I'm also working with tech companies, advising them on how they can tweak their tech so they can think of content creators, and of course, for me, journalists, nonfiction storytellers. Most technology does not think of content creators until later, when they realize they need to make some money, they need to make some content, they need wider reach. But the vast majority never think of nonfiction storytellers, journalists, how we use the technology on the day-to-day to create content at a fast pace. So I work with tech companies and often advise them or ask for features early on, and then I try to bring these both worlds together. You would think that would be easy, but it is not. They're both distrusting of each other. They often greet each other with arms crossed. So I am the glue, hopefully, or attempting to be a bridge that brings these two cultures together to see how they can unlock and support each other and advance their goals together. So that's my focus. This is an example of one of the recent technologies that I got. This is, for those who may not know what it is an AR LED fan. So AR LED fan spins around so fast that a hologram appears without having to wear glasses. This is starting to emerge more and more in China. There's some companies here in the US that are distributing them. This was $300 off Amazon. I bought it after I saw a young lady cosplaying Doctor Strange with two of these in her hands, and she had the shields going, and I was like, oh my God, how can I use that for storytelling? Right? That is what my brain is constantly trying to do. Oh, and my keynote is hanging. Oh boy. All right, hold on, here we go. Back in here. So with all this tech, like I said, my job is to look at it for journalism. How do I use this technology for journalism? And this came up actually last week in a conversation, so I thought I'd share this story here. Y'all may remember the Yo app. Actually, the vast majority probably don't remember the Yo app. But the Yo app came out in 2014. This was pre-push notifications, before apps can send you an alert, before a website can even send you an alert. This app came out and 1 million of us signed up for it, and then 2 weeks later it disappeared. But the point of this app was that you can tap on your friend's name, Leo, Lucas, Jason, Serena. You tap at their name, and on the other end, on their phone, they would get a yo, literally a little yo sound, and that was it, right? Nothing, pointless, ephemeral, neat. What's the point of that? Well, my brain is wired in a way that I look at this platform, I think, how can I hijack this for journalism? So I had the idea, but I didn't implement it, which is a regret of mine. But I had the idea of, what if I used the Yo app, and instead of just sending you a yo to say, hey, I'm thinking of you, it is, I'll send you a yo every time an unarmed Black man is shot by the police, right? Every time that happens, you will get a yo. That yo just went from something light to something chilling. And that frequency of the yo is an audio visualization of how often this is happening. Maybe it's happening once a month, maybe it's happening once a week, but that frequency of that yo carries a lot more weight than it did before. That's an example of how my brain is wired and how I look at all different types of technology and try to formulate a way to use it for contextual storytelling, nonfiction storytelling. And you can now come to USC Annenberg, MIT, it's an amazing school, but you can come work with me and spend your year tinkering and prototyping the future of journalism with me at my little place. I often get asked, you know, journalism is seen as a dying industry, that it's disruptive, and geez, we're on our heels. How am I preparing my students for the next disruption, right? I used to give talks titled this way, and I'll answer that question in the end. But my day-to-day, outside of tinkering with stuff, is working with students. And under the name JOVRNALISM, we trademarked it. This little stupid typo has turned into something really special, where students, grad, undergrad, students from different majors across campus, whether it's gaming, whether it's engineering, of course, journalism, PR, comm, marketing, students from the academy, all different backgrounds come together, never done this stuff before, curious about it, but aligned with the mission, which is how might we use these emerging technologies to tell stories of underserved and underrepresented communities. And that's how JOVRNALISM began, really in 2015. I did an AR journalism class in 2013, where I augmented the downtown LA library. In 2014, I did a Google Glass journalism class. It got written up by BuzzFeed, not BuzzFeed, Mashable and Fast Company and Wall Street Journal, and Coca-Cola even wrote about me in these dorky glasses. But I wasn't wearing them because I was proud to wear them. I was taking one for the team, you guys, trying to figure out how do I tell stories with these wearable devices. And in 2015, I decided to put a class together around 360 video. VR had been around for a bit. In fact, when I got hired at USC in 2009, my colleague hired at that time as well was Nani de la Peña. Nani and I advised a magazine class on how they could be more digital. At the time, I was focusing on, you know, content management systems, how to use WordPress or data visualizations or audio slideshows, about a story about the Great Recession and how more people were going to food banks. And I remember Nani saying, what if we did this in VR? And I looked at her and I was like, Nani, you're crazy. We only have 15 weeks this semester. It took her a year, but she launched Hunger and was this incredible VR piece. And she's evolved along the way there to become, rightfully so, the godmother of VR. I had been tinkering. My interest has always been in augmented reality and always tinkering with different technologies. And so when 2015 came around, or just before, I had seen 360 video through the Samsung Gear headset. And I thought 360 video, this is something my colleagues can understand, because they didn't understand AR and they don't understand why I'm wearing those stupid looking glasses. But video is something that they can wrap their hands around in terms of storytelling. And so students and I got together and created this class. And we were essentially like monkeys at a computer, just like, how does this thing work? And in the fall of 2015, we prototyped some stories. We did a story about roller derby. We did a story about Ciclavia, which is this incredible cycling event that takes over parts of the city. And we did a virtual tour of our new building at the time. These things were featured by YouTube 360, and it got tens of thousands of views. And that started our path, where we then started working with a variety of other media companies and tech companies. We work with ProPublica. That's the project I'm going to talk about first. But we've worked with ProPublica, NPR. Our stuff has been seen in the New York Times, Al Jazeera, Contrast VR. We, like I said, work with different tech companies like Insta360, which makes fantastic 360 cameras, SGO, which creates software to stitch together these 360 videos, Capturing Reality, which I'll talk about later as well. Just a partnership between media companies that we hope to change their culture to embrace this technology, but also collaborate with these media companies so they can amplify our stories. And then tech companies, like I said, that may not know anything about journalism or really are shocked that we're doing this stuff, that they want to support. And the resulting projects has won awards. I'm going to brag for a moment and say that we won, you know, the Webby Award, the Online Journalism Award, and the Mark of Excellence Award just last year. The Society of Professional Journalists gave out awards to student journalists. We won an award there, and then we won the Best in Show. I'm going to just brag for a moment. The Best in Show, out of all the student journalism produced last year, was the best of the best. So that is something I'm super proud of. And really, while I don't care about the awards, why do I use awards? It's because it offers legitimacy to both the media and the tech side that may not understand how important it is to produce these types of stories on these platforms. It shows the media side that, hey, this isn't just some rinky-dink thing. It isn't just some sort of fad. It isn't just some sort of gimmick. It is producing quality content that is being recognized locally, nationally, and internationally as among the best, if not the best. And on the tech side, it's showing how their platforms and their software and hardware may be used for something bigger and greater than what they envisioned. That first project that I mentioned is started when Scott Klein from ProPublica reached out and said, hey, we're doing an investigation at ProPublica about how the Houston Ship Channel is a sitting duck. In partnership with the Texas Tribune, they were talking to scientists that were predicting mighty storms, superstorms, that would flood the ship channel and cause an environmental disaster, an economic disaster, and potentially kill thousands of people. But they knew that if they just wrote about it, a lot of people wouldn't believe them. For those who don't know, Katrina was actually predicted 2 years before it happened, right? It was front page news in the Times-Picayune. And when it was first published, people thought it was, what did they call it? Disaster porn, that it was just the media overhyping. And then when it happened 2 years later, politicians were saying, no one saw this coming. Well, Scott had the idea, what if we use VR to illustrate what is possible, what is going to happen, so we get them to feel the weight. And he asked if me and my students, who were just monkeys on a computer, would be able to visualize this stuff in VR. And I said, I don't know, but let's find out. That is my mantra. I don't know, but let's find out. Is the most exciting moment where we roll up our sleeves and we start working together as a group, and we brainstormed a variety of different stories. And one experience that we came up with started off originally of like, okay, they're talking about a storm surge. What is a storm surge? Well, Superstorm Sandy had happened in the previous year. And for those who don't know what a storm surge is, it's essentially a tsunami. We know and respect and fear tsunamis. Tsunamis are a huge wall of water that comes to shore, triggered by the earth, or an earthquake, right? A storm surge is like a tsunami, a wall of water, but it's triggered by wind, just to kind of simplify it, a wall of water. And Hurricane Ike generated a 10-foot storm surge. Now, to illustrate that, we could just go to computer graphics. None of my students ever done that. They had been tinkering on it on their own, playing in Unity. And one student said, I think I can pull this off. And he said we could create something in CG potentially. And then the students started to think about, like, what if we put you in a house and you hear the wind on the outside, and then you see the rain, and then all of a sudden the roof gets ripped off the building that you're in. And I stopped the students to remind them, hey, while we're in LA, this is not Hollywood. We're doing journalism. One, it's really hard to do. And again, we only have 15 weeks. But let's focus on the factual things, right? We don't know the structure of any house anywhere along the Houston Ship Channel. How do we know the roof is going to go, right? So what are we trying to illustrate? And we boiled it down to, if we're focusing on the aspect of the storm surge, the scale of the storm surge. And so we went out to Houston during spring break. I want to thank my wife for letting me front the money to do that. That money that you see in the news about trying to find creative alternative ways to get famous people's kids into USC, that money doesn't trickle down to me. So I have to hustle and find ways to fund these projects. So note that you do not need to be at a big institution, whether academic or a news organization, to pull off these projects. You just have to hustle and be creative on how to do it. And so I found that I was able to pay for this, and then luckily ProPublica reimbursed me as I took students to Houston during spring break. And for 2 days, we were on the ground doing reporting. And we went actually to this one spot along the water where we found a house with an empty lot next to it. And we thought, we're gonna start our story here, 360, actual place, and then using CG, we're gonna drop a house based on the model of this actual house. We're gonna drop a house in the empty lot, and then we're gonna transition from real life to CG. So you know this isn't something just made up. I'm also a fan of memes. I'm an imagurian. And so there is a meme called banana for scale. For those who don't know what that means, it is basically when you put a banana in a picture, you know the size of the things in the picture, right? And so for us, we decided to use the house as our banana to let you know, oh, this is a huge storm surge. And so in this particular case, we had illustrated a 10-foot storm surge, and we drew a line there. But the scientists were predicting what they were calling a mighty Ike, which was a 30-foot storm surge. And in VR, we were able to give you that sense of scale. Now, this is a 2D flat and so unimpressive, but in VR, you have to tilt your head back. And whatever you thought about the previous 10-foot storm surge, where you think, oh, that house might survive, when you see the 30-foot one, you get that sense of weight, you get that sense of scale. Super simple, easy to do, easy to do. Easy to do back then, no. A student did this project, and we had a little help. We're actually from Nani's startup. There was someone there who did the finishing touches to make us cross the finish line. But it worked in terms of a proof of concept. That class unlocked more partnerships and opportunities. And one of them was with the Desert Sun out of Palm Springs. What they did was they called me and they said, hey, would you ever work with us? We love what you did with ProPublica. And I said, sure, pitch me your ideas. And they pitched me the Salton Sea. I'm from California. I heard vaguely of the Salton Sea. So while I was on the phone with them, I did a Google image search and found jaw-dropping photos of the Salton Sea. It is the largest lake in California. It's got a quirky history. It was made by accident in the early 1900s. I think they were stealing water and they lost control, and it filled this prehistoric lake bed. In the 60s and 70s, it was like the heyday vacation spot for rich folks and celebrities. But now it is drying out and is turning into one of the largest environmental disasters in the state. There are fish die-offs, meaning that the salinity level in algae in the water is so toxic, it kills the fish and they just die off and their carcasses litter the shore. Those are my chucks. They were brand new chucks, you guys. I went out for a meeting. They took me to the lake bed where there are all these fish carcasses. It's not really sand, it's ground up fish bone, and it's mushy like you're walking on a sponge, and some spots were mushier than others, and this mold ate my shoe. So that was really frustrating, but it was a breathtaking, beautiful, surreal place that we did a project called Turning Tides, the story of the Salton Sea. This was published by the Desert Sun and then amplified as well with USA Today. It was a multi-part series where we talked to scientists, we talked to kids that were at higher risk of asthma. We focused on a bunch of different aspects of the story, but instead of me talking about it, I want you to experience. So everyone, I'm not kidding, please get your smartphone out, launch the YouTube app, please, and click on the little magnifying glass and do a search for JOVRNALISM Salton Sea. JOVRNALISM Salton Sea. JOVRNALISM is spelled journalism, but instead of a U, it's a V. See what we did there, VR. So you will do a search. I'm going to do it here with you. And actually, I want you to watch this video. It's 2.5 minutes. I think we have time. Hopefully, I'm not going to regret that decision, but JOVRNALISM, SALTON, C. It might tell you, hey, you misspelled journalism wrong, but no. JOVRNALISM introduction. Go ahead and click on that. In fact, I am going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I want you to watch this video. Right, let's see here. And you can look around in 360. This is called Magic Window. And I want you to experience it. It's 2 minutes, so please watch that now. And then in the chat, tell me what you think, right? Our opening shot. Let me go back into the shared screen so you can do that search for those who can see it. JOVRNALISM, SALTON C. Our opening shot is with a drone. We set up a 360 camera on that. And then we had different types of 360 cameras that we placed throughout the playa to create this space, to create this story, trying our best to capture what it looked like. It's just like you're on another planet. It's beautiful, it's heartbreaking. We did a really fantastic job, in my opinion. Clearly I'm biased, but we did a fantastic job, damn it, to capture this space in a variety of ways. The only thing that is missing is the sense of smell, because boy, rotten fish smells pretty pungently. The sense of smell of sulfur, because that was in the air, and there's some natural geysers in that area, and then the squishiness of the ground. VR and immersive technology will offer that sooner than we think, but at least in 360 video, we were able to distribute these that experience. Indy asks if we had any issues storing the data. We used, at the time, we used what's called the Zcam. Zcam, the S1, I think it was. It's a cylindrical camera that had 4 SD cards. And so it is hard. So the files are like gigs each. Then you have to stitch it together through software. I have a beast of a computer, laptop often in quotes, but the computers have gotten better, stronger, and smaller. We processed that, and then we only stitched together the footage that we used in our final pieces, right? We sometimes did extra stuff just in case, but the stitched footage is what we kept. And then the raw footage, I kept it for a little bit, but after a while, it did take up hard drive space. And I thought, I am not going back to this. I'm not going to go make some more changes. This is not my masterpiece. AKA, that's my attention span as a journalist. I move on to something else. And so we deleted those archives, the unstitched archives for the most part, but we keep the stitched ones because the files do get big. So yeah, definitely that. All right, hopefully you experienced it. If not, you missed out, but we'll have other chances. Come back to this reality. If you are still watching that piece, come back here. Again, proud pop-up professor. We won our first big award with this, the Online Journalism Award. And just to brag, somehow, our little scrappy team that went to Palm Springs during spring break beat out the BBC, a partnership between the BBC, the Guardian, the Toronto Star, the University of British Columbia, amongst other universities. They made a fantastic piece, but ours was deemed the winner that year. And it, again, helped validate the work that we were doing. A year later, my students and I had the idea of trying to figure out, we hear in the news deportation, what happens to folks who grew up in this country that get deported to Mexico? For media, usually that's when the story ends. There was a raid, people were detained and eventually deported. This was before the height of the migrant caravans, before all the child separation stuff. This was not great, but not as bad as things are now. They deported, we as a country deport a lot of people. A lot of them came to the US when they were 3 years old, 6 months old, and are deported as adults, including veterans. And so we decided to go to Tijuana, Mexico during spring break. This time I had a grant and was able to use some of that grant money to pay for this trip. The previous project was a partnership with the Desert Sun, so they paid halvesies with us, so we were able to fund it that way. This one was a grant where I took students to a hotel in Tijuana, and for 2-3 days, we worked the streets of Tijuana talking to deportees, different students again. Really, while this technology is cool and amazing in this class and in this crew, what makes it special is the diversity of participants. Different majors, different backgrounds coming together to pull this stuff off. So, including Hawkins, who was in a mobility device, and I was like, Jesus Christ, the sidewalks of Tijuana are not going to be known to be the smoothest. What are we going to do? But he was able to pull it off. Really incredible moments with former MS-13 gang members that had been deported. They were our guides because we were working with a church called Victory Outreach. That's actually Pastor Mo and his family. His family are Americans. He got deported, but they went with him to open up a church in TJ. And now I want you to watch the opening scene, just the first opening scene of our introduction. Please go back to your phone and do a search for The Deported Journalism. Make sure you're not watching the making of. Watch the first piece, The Deported: Life Beyond the Border. What I want you to watch is, what we did here is the watercolor effect at the very beginning. So take a look at that and just watch it for a minute. Maybe go to Casa del Migrante. So let me do this with you. So launch your YouTube app again, do a search for The Deported Journalism with a VR in there. And you should be hearing this music. And again, magic window. If you had Google Cardboard, you can tap, and on the lower corner, there's a little mask that will split the screen. I have these little lenses. Let me see if I can find one here, which is like the modern version of Google Cardboard that you can split and put on your phone. But with this piece, what was really phenomenal is that the students basically prototyped and invented that watercolor effect in a very ingenious way. And transition from art to this beautiful art to the static, the stark reality. Those turnstiles are the last thing that people see when they get deported from the country. In front of them is a country that they may have never been in, they never grew up in, they don't know, they're scared. Behind them is a country that doesn't want them and kick them out. And where do they go? And so this intro takes you to different locations and tells you how people adjust. And then we focus on the multi-part series of meeting and people who've been deported, including veterans, like I mentioned, mothers, families, and we profile Pastor Mo, Mari Cookie. Mari Cookie is this incredible woman in San Diego that crosses the border every day. She runs a little shop where she's giving away clothes and food and trying to help refugees, asylum seekers, and deported. And we also profile, when we talked about this, right? So let me stop sharing for a moment and kind of tell you this story on why we do this stuff, right? So cool, technology's cool, yay, amazing. That's not the point. The point is, how do we use this technology to do journalism better? And so when we were brainstorming this story, we thought, well, okay, what can this technology do? And really, if you think about it, 360 is 2 cameras that are stitched together. We put software, not just 2, but it could be multiple cameras stitched together. What if we do that to bring 2 worlds together? We know that parents and children are being separated, being deported, and they're in Mexico and they don't get to see their kid. Could we virtually bring them together? So we tracked down a young lady whose dad was deported when she was about 15. He was in Tijuana, Mexico, running a tattoo shop, got remarried, was an entrepreneur, supporting his daughter here left behind in Los Angeles. She was looking into going to beauty school, pursuing her artistic side, like her dad's artistic side, going to college, and they call each other when they can. And so what we did was I and a team of students went to Mexico, and other students stayed behind in the US, and we captured when they called each other. And in post-production, we took this world where he was and this world where Desiree was, and we brought them together, removing the wall, removing the distance. And in 360, you are now watching this conversation between father and daughter, having just a regular conversation, but removing the gap and distance between them. That's a way to justify using this stuff. Now, one thing I should state is, you notice this isn't true VR. You guys are probably working with amazing, breathtaking, over-the-top technologies. We think of that when we think of immersive storytelling. Why are we focusing on virtual in 360? Well, because my job as a journalist is to inform my diverse audience, not just the people that can afford high-end headsets. I want to inform my diverse communities in any which way necessary. So you notice you can experience these pieces without having to buy a new piece of equipment. You already have a smartphone, you already have the YouTube app. You don't have to download our app, you don't have to buy anything new. We can reach you. We can reach you through YouTube, we can reach you through Facebook and other places. And so that is why we compromise on this, whoa, breathtaking over the top stuff, and really aim for scale. Really aim of how can we tell these stories quickly, cheaply, effectively, and reach an audience. So that's why we go 360 mode. I saw a question, sorry about the SALTON piece. Yeah, we also prototype, how do we tell stories, right? When early days for 360, they will say, don't move the camera unless you're gonna make someone throw up. Well, we put it on a drone and we figured out if you're consistent in one direction, in one consistent speed, you can do it. You can have people go on that ride. We've learned different audio techniques, editing techniques, really stuff that you can teach yourself. The YouTube Creators Academy has really great video series about that stuff. And trying to just put you in these places. It's called holding presence. Holding presence in these places with these people that you normally may not. That is one of the things that makes this super, super engaging and interesting, right? So that was The Deported. Hopefully you checked it out and tried that. Let me go back into our slides over here. Make sure I have this button going here. And again, I see a couple people raise their hands. We'll go more formally into the Q&A in the later part. I want to make sure we get to watch the stuff a little bit more. So The Deported, we were a finalist for the OJAs, didn't win it, but we won the student category for the Webbies. Again, why am I mentioning these awards? Because it legitimizes it in the eyes of some colleagues that might think like, oh, you guys are just playing with computer stuff. You know, you're just a tech evangelist, which is a quote from a colleague of mine who doesn't know or understand the world that we live in and what we're producing and the impact it has in ways that their text piece or column is not going to resonate with anybody, right? My goal is to prototype the future of journalism, the future of storytelling, to stay relevant, to stay ahead of the game, right? So one project that we did in the fall of 2018, this was a project that changed the framework for us, is called Homeless Realities. In this particular project, we worked with Al Jazeera, Contrast VR, which published the piece, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But what we did differently here is that we worked with members of the homeless community, the housing insecure, connected to them through nonprofits, where I did a 3-day training at the downtown LA library. They hosted me in 2013 for the AR journalism class. I told them this crazy idea and they were like, come on over, plus we'll buy lunch, which was great because I hadn't even thought about the idea of lunch. But what the notion was, is I had some leftover money from the Tijuana trip and saw that at the time, the 360 gear, the Samsung 360 gear, new cameras were about $100 something bucks, really cheap. And that I was able to put a kit together that I could give to the participants, not only to use and train them on how to use it, but for them to keep. So they came for 2 days. I introduced the technology of immersive storytelling, inspired them, and then asked them, how might you use this technology to tell your stories on your terms, right? In journalism, journalists parachute into communities like we parachuted into the Houston Ship Channel or Tijuana, gathered the stuff, and then took off. This was a different approach where we wanted to collaborate, but not decide what the stories were going to be. And the students would learn the technologies by helping the participants produce and tell their own stories. That was the goal, and it was amazing. The stories that they produced were just so rich. Like Angela, she talked about how she runs a small business out of her car, and you get to go inside her car and see how she's tricked it out. She's a sophisticated engineer that she's figured out a way to survive on the streets, right? Being homeless, a lot of people just dismiss them as not smart or addicts or crazy, and they may have history behind them, but to survive on the street, they have to hustle in ways that I know I can't pull off what they're pulling off. And so she wanted to talk about how she runs her small business, Doggy's Aid. She wants to be the dog whisperer of Venice Beach. So she talked about her story. There's this couple that came together. They were dating for 4 months. And they wanted to talk about how do you foster intimacy in a relationship when your lives are on the street and so public. He lived behind a construction site. She lived in transitional housing. He would pack up his tent every morning, take the metro to pick her up at the transitional housing, and then the whole day was a date. It is such a beautiful story that we as journalists would never even have thought to try to tell that story. And there was a moment while my students, one was a managing editor of the student publication, who when he first heard this pitch thought, this is never gonna run in my publication. This isn't news, this isn't journalism. But as I were taking a break from interviews because there was a siren going by, the young lady, Daisy, asked my student and said, why doesn't the media tell these types of stories? Why do they only portray us as addicts, as mental patients, as broken people? We're human beings too. And the resulting story is just so beautiful. I hope you guys get to experience love like we see them have. I have no idea if they're still together. I know a lot of them have gone to transitional housing. One has an apartment now. I should check on them. But you just see something that they decided what their story was going to be. In our training, they came up with the idea in terms of like, I want to do this, I want to pick her up, we want to go on a date, I want to show you how we spend our time together, and then drop her off at home. They came up with the story arc, and it is just phenomenal. But we also did something related to the hot dog, right? This whole talk was titled Hijacking the Hot Dog. Where's the hot dog? We're getting to the hot dog part. The hot dog, for those who do not know, is this AR hot dog that was urban legend, the legend happened, as Instagram was ripping off or inspired by Snapchat, taking all their features. The CEO said, don't worry, you guys, the future of Snapchat is this hot dog. And this dancing augmented reality hot dog was displayed and born. It turned into a ridiculous meme put in awkward places. But my brain saw it and thought, holy crap, this has a lot of potential in ways that people aren't imagining. At the time, I had learned of a technology. How might I use it? We learned of a technology called photogrammetry. Y'all may know what that is, but for those who don't, it's when you take a series of photos of a static object or a room, and you run it through some software to create a CG, a 3D model, not an artist's interpretation, but a 3D photorealistic model of the object that you took a picture of. So I brought my tent to campus. My students and I just took pictures of it, and thanks to the support from Catching Reality, we took about 100 plus photos, ran it through the software, hit a button, crossed our fingers, and poof, this model came out. This is a 3D model of my old camping tent using the software Reality Capture. And this produced a model that was over a gig big. But I had an idea thanks to some people who told me, hey, check out Snapchat. I was like, Snapchat? That dancing hot dog thing? They had released software called Snapchat Lens Studio. It is free, it is available. Snapchat is the social platform that is not for our demographic, let's just be honest. It is for a younger crew. You may have known them through augmented reality to change your face into a puppy dog or to throw up a rainbow. But you can now use the software to create augmented lenses. The trick is that it has to be less than 4 megabytes. That's about a typical size of an MP3 song. So we had to find a way to convert the 3D model into something smaller if we wanted to get into the Snapchat lens. Because here's the idea that we had, right? Sure, 360 video, you get to step in that world. But what if we bring their world to your reality? What if we can use augmented reality to have you enhance your reality to bring perhaps photogrammetry of their dwellings into their spaces? We approached Snapchat about it and they were like, Professor, it's a great idea. It's never gonna happen. Our stuff won't work that way. I told a student of mine, he said, Profe, it's not gonna work. I was like, dude, just try. And he figured it out. We brought Snapchat Lens Studio and our type of storytelling together. Here's your chance. Trust me, you wanna try this out, get Snapchat ready, log in. We met Jennifer at Echo Park. She allowed us, we showed her what we were hoping to do. She's like, holy crap, hell yes, do it. And so we did photogrammetry of her tent. This is not an artist's interpretation of her dwelling. This is our first model that we did live. And it's not perfect, there's some holes in it, but the student was able to optimize it in such a way that it would fit in Snapchat. And just because there's a tent there doesn't mean you can tell a story. So we try to figure out, well, how might we use this to tell a story? Well, he blew me away. Chaitanya Shah added the ability to put interactive audio hotspots. So not only can you bring Jennifer's tent in your reality, you can walk around it. She will give you an audio tour. So this is in augmented reality, interactive infographic driven by audio. I never know which words, how to put them in order, but it's something that it's a data visualization. It's an infographic that you can step into and interact with. And again, it's hard to explain, so I want you to do this. So for those who got my hints, go ahead and launch Snapchat. And I want you to point the camera to the snap code. That's the polka dotted yellow thing. And just like the animation shows, point your camera to it and then press it like you're pressing a button. Make sure your audio is switched on, and it's gonna tell you, hey, you're unlocking this lens for say 48 hours, and say yes. Then you load it up. And what I want you to do is find an open spot and tap on the ground to place the tent.
Hi, my name is Jennifer.
Jennifer will welcome you.
Homeless people live here in Echo Park.
And walk around. After she welcomes you, the little blue buttons will appear and you can walk around her tent, tap to learn about her pee-pee bucket, her pee-pee cup, or her shower bucket, or how she survives by charging up her phone. But here's the really cool part. I want you to walk inside her tent. We've watched people do this time and time again, go inside her tent. I wish I could hear your audio reaction, but when you go inside her tent, you see how she lives. Most people walk through the front door, which is fascinating because this is not really there. You can enter this model any which way, but no matter where you are on the model, people go to the front door and walk in that way. For those who do not have this set up here, let me make sure, gotta triple check. For those who did not do it, there you go. I am sharing audio. So I want you to see it. This is a screen capture of Jennifer's experience. Hopefully you hear the audio. This is recording of in my office.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm going to show you how homeless people live here in Echo Park.
You can walk around
and we're going to look around at my tent today. So welcome.
Interact with the blue dots.
That is a portable charger. Most homeless people have them to charge their phones. There's no outlets in a tent. You could charge that at a local library, which the majority do.
We wanted to
Starbucks,
use
Coffee
this,
Bean, etc. have done away with their
experience what it's like to live in this confined space, right? That was the goal. It's not just a dancing hot dog, y'all. It's a compelling platform to get you to experience what it's like to be homeless. Not like legit, you know what it's like to be homeless, but you get to see a world that you often try to ignore. Here in Los Angeles, we have a big homeless community. People look the other way when they're exiting a freeway. They see all these tents put up. They don't want to acknowledge that there's a big population that needs help. And here we are hijacking this shiny technology to get people to engage with a community or a topic that they tend to ignore. This was really a phenomenal project. I hope you guys really tried it because the experiences are, to me, just amazing. So let me pump this over here. All right, so that project won. We were actually honorees, didn't get more finalists for the Webby student category, but we did win the Shorty Awards. Al Jazeera published this. Contrast VR, which is the immersive branch, the immersive arm of Al Jazeera, were our media partners. They have an incredible campaign called My People, Our Stories. I pitched them the idea and they were like, let's go for it. And so we did it together. They submitted us for the project for the Webby in the reality TV category, and we won that. And like I said, we won SPJ's Mark of Excellence, Best in Show. This hijacking of the hot dog, we were invited by Snapchat to attend the Partner Summit, showed what we were doing to the engineers, and they were blown away that this was possible. So we showed it to OLC's, original lens creators or official lens creators, select crew from Snapchat that gets to prototype and use this technology and be beta testers. They were blown away by what we did. I'm still blown away by what we did, you guys, because all of Jennifer's stuff is less than 4 megabytes, less than 4 megabytes. We optimized it to be mobile as best we can, right? So you can learn on how to do this stuff. The way that we work, I'm not a very good businessman, to be completely honest. I give away my stuff for free. The reason is I believe that we need to embrace these new technologies and include as many diverse voices as possible and make it accessible to everyone, right? The New York Times, the Washington Post, they have better and bigger resources than I do with me and my students. They may not share how they do their stuff, but I will. So you can go to medium.com/JOVRNALISM, medium.com/JOVRNALISM, and there is a tutorial written by chat that'll walk you through it. And at the bottom, there's a 10-minute video tutorial that I recorded from my class, but we thought, here, let's just put it up here as well. Template files, so you can build this. We actually also on Medium, if you were interested in the watercolor technique, students wrote up a how-to to do that as well. So we put this stuff out there because we think we need the industry to embrace it. We need storytellers to embrace it. We need more voices in the mix there. And so we've templatized it, and we've done stories about migrant artifacts in terms of artifacts found along the Arizona US border. Ooh, my thing was crashing there. I don't know if it's gonna play. Oh, there they go. So we scanned these artifacts found along the Arizona-Mexico border. Water bottles, a little kid boot, these things called carpet shoes. Somewhere in Mexico was cutting out carpets and making them slippers. And you place those artifacts in your reality, and they, Reverend Jim, who is a curator of these artifacts, tells you why, right? Why do they wear carpet shoes? Because it hides their tracks as they walk in the desert, right? For migrants crossing the border. Undocumented migrants crossing the border. Why is their water bottle covered up in black or black bottles? So the shimmer when the sun hits the water doesn't reveal where they're located. We also did a project called Trashed along the Tijuana border. this polluted river valley and how a nonprofit is using tires and bottles to make buildings in this neighborhood that is just drowning in trash. We used Snapchat to create these accessible pieces. Now, why Snapchat? Well, one, like I mentioned, the technology was there, but two, I could spend a lot of money and make my own app, but no one's gonna download it. I have to spend all this money marketing it and things like that. Chances are they're gonna have Snapchat more than they'll have the JOVRNALISM app. And let's get them, why compete with that technology? Why not just harness it and figure out how I can hijack their platform for our needs, right? We had to invent the UI for this stuff. We had to tell people like, hey, turn on your audio because a lady's gonna give you a tour. Like the user experience, user interface in someone else's platform is tough to do, but we experimented and I think it's really effective, especially if I'm standing next to you and telling you what to do, but at least it's somewhat intuitive. People are curious enough to go into the tent to see what happens if I go in there, and it's an incredible experience, right? Wider reach than our app. That's why we do it. Remember, my goal as a journalist is to inform my diverse communities in any ethical means necessary, and that includes a Snapchat app. In one lens, you can be throwing up a rainbow. In the other lens, you can learn about the pollution in Tijuana, or undocumented migrants, or the homeless, right? A project that we did last fall, so started a year ago and actually published earlier this year, is Who We Are, Finding Home, where we worked with youth in foster care. We partnered up with Peace for Kids, and it's an incredible nonprofit where we trained young adults to be able to tell their own story. Again, they determined what story they wanted to tell on their terms. This time, Samsung donated cameras. Y'all, if you have those Samsung cameras and you want to give them to me, I will put them in the hands of people who are incredible storytellers, stories that are often ignored, and help them tell those stories. So this was we produced six pieces, 5 pieces and some AR pieces. And in this AR piece, we did photogrammetry of this little teddy bear. It turns out this teddy bear is a controversial little item. When you get separated from your family, you're given this teddy bear kind of like a security blanket as you get processed in the system. And for some youth, they freaking hate this teddy bear. It's a symbol of when the moment they were stolen from their parents, even though their parents were abusive or in an unstable, volatile household, their parents are their parents. And so they felt really betrayed, and the teddy bear was a symbol of that. For another person, Jenny, the teddy bear was this security blanket that helped their transition through. So we did a photogrammetry of the teddy bear. So in Snapchat, you can place that teddy bear in place. And then we put 2 audio cards there that when you tap, you can hear their story. Here's a little bit of Jenny.
A little brown bear that sits
right, this little controversial bear. We recently did a project this spring semester about cultural burning. This is the indigenous approach to land management, which is really important to talk about now as California is on fire, quite literally. And one of the things we came up with was AR portals. So you can do this if you, again, Snapchat, take a picture of it. It'll unlock a lens, which is a little simple doorway. You place that doorway in your reality. And like the tent, you can walk into this portal. You've seen this, a lot of you, if you've looked in AR, you've seen this with different type of AR features, portals. We wanted the ability to walk into the portal and now be at a cultural burn in Chico, California. That's Northern California. There you're inside the world and they're looking back at my home, right? Experiencing a cultural burn. We were invited to Qatar to present on our work. And while we were out there, we did an immersive doc on being there, our adventures, but we also did AR portals of these places. So you can use Snapchat right now to port yourself to a souk in Doha, or teleport yourself to the breathtakingly beautiful Islamic Art Museum. So those are the things that we've done. We've done Snapchat. Instagram is a lot more active, of course. we actually used Instagram and embraced their social gaming experience and made a COVID experience where instead of saying, what Disney princess are you? We ask you, here are these two randomized items. Which one do you think has sold more because of COVID? And here it's aerosol spray versus sunscreen. You flip the camera and the scale of the model reveals how much it sold. One of the best ones is oat milk versus toilet paper. Oat milk has increased sales more than toilet paper has since last year, since COVID has happened. You know, that question, preparing for the next disruption, how am I preparing my students to react to the next disruption? That's not what I'm doing. I'm preparing them to lead the next disruption. They are prototyping the future. They are the ones who are going to disrupt our journalism industry, our storytelling industry, and every other industry possible. Because why be passive? Why wait? I'll steal this quote from Brian Solis, where he said, disruption is either going to happen to you or because of you. Let me tell you, one of those has got a lot more job security. Make the disruption, lead that disruption. I preach this to journalists. I want you to do this because we have a code of ethics in journalism. So let's raise the bar on what these stories can be. Let's use them for good. Let's set the tone of what these types of stories can be. Thank you so much for hearing me talk about our class. It's an honor, truly. And you can tell I'm a proud papa. You can follow JOVRNALISM on our different social platforms. And there's a lot of questions here. So that's my contact information. I'm WebJournalist on the Twitters. Let's get into a dialogue. Let me turn off my screen sharing. I'm going to go into some of the questions and see if I can answer them, but feel free to keep adding them in the chat as well as the Q&A thing. So
Robert, we're also have questions from our respondents directly, the panelists. So
great. Why don't we go there and I'll try to weave in some stuff. So I see William raising his hand. So William.
So Robert, thanks. Really inspiring stuff. And I have to say also familiar, our XR course is called Hacking XR. It's about breaking it and finding out what else it can do. Sandra Rodriguez does a great job with it.
Great.
One of the other things we see in our work is a problem of time and space with emerging media. Time in the sense that stuff is ephemeral. Like here today, gone tomorrow, and you invest in it and the platform doesn't work again. Space in the sense that these are really fragmented media forms. They speak to fragmented publics, small publics sometimes, or sometimes very particular demographics. The strategy you're doing, and what I want to know is a conscious strategy, advertent or inadvertent, is partnerships. Partnerships are a great way to leverage what you're doing, to get it out there, to amplify it, resonate it. Cross-platform journalism strikes me as like essential in an era of fragmentation. How are you guys thinking about that? Is it just kind of people approaching you, or you really have a plan to do this cross-platform through partnership?
All of this, to be pulling the curtain back entirely, is organic on how things happened, right? So the Homeless Realities Project, man, what a great idea to work with the homeless community and train them on that. That actually happened because while I had the idea of how to use photogrammetry and to create a Snapchat experience, a colleague reminded me, you self-centered a-hole. You're doing what the media does, which is we'll parachute in and take their story. What's in it for them? Why would they do that? Here in LA, when the media talks about the homeless, it's almost like they're visiting a zoo, and it's really a horrible power dynamic. And so that's what made me think, well, okay, well, what can I offer? I can train them on how to tell the story, but what's the point of learning 360 if you don't have a camera? So that's how it kind of led me on that path. The partnerships are also organic. We do get hit up. This is a student-led course, so I get all these partnerships, interests, and then I present it to the students, and then the students decide what they want to do. What is the topic? This semester, for example, the students decided to focus on domestic abuse. So we're working with the East Los Angeles Women's Health Clinic and working with survivors of domestic abuse to kind of capture different types of stories there. The students pick that. So while the students lead, I become like a film producer over a summer break or winter break, They tell me what they want to do after I present, and then I go solidify that. Sometimes there's a media partner lined up, sometimes there's not, right? So for the Finding Home, the Foster Youth Project, KCET, PBS SoCal, they had just gotten a grant for foster coverage. So it made sense to collaborate there. So it organically happens. One thing I can tell you, there's a couple rules when I do a partnership. One, I don't want to fight with you. You're either going to be on board and believe in this technology or not, right? We had the CEO of Magic Leap come speak to our class, Roni, and I asked him, like, are you frustrated by bad press and things like that? And this is how I live my life out, how he described it. It's like, look, there are muggles and there are wizards in this world. I can fight with muggles and try to convince them that magic happens, or I can use my energy to make magical things with wizards. So that's one framework. The other framework in our partnership is the students are deciding. Don't tell us what to do. You can help with editorial, your questions are valid, but these are the storytellers. They're the ones who are dictating what we're going to produce. You have the right of first refusal. You can decline it, but if you want it, you can totally do it, but it's on this kind of agreement. And so that's a difficult agreement for some news organizations, but we make it possible. Someone asked in the Q&A, just to acknowledge at least some questions in the Q&A, was how do we pick those stories? It's often with nonprofits or opportunities that I see throughout the year. I go to conferences and speak at events and network. I bring those to the students, and then the students decide what they want to do. A good story usually is something that gives you access to something that you couldn't get access before. So, you know, an opportunity to be to the border, an opportunity to be at, you know, the Sultancy, an opportunity to be with someone that you normally don't have access to. Nadav, I see you, panelist, has your hand up. Let's acknowledge the ability for that hand. What is your question, sir?
Well, first of all, thank you. That was a wonderful range of projects, and I love that they're all coming kind of in collaboration with different people and with students. And my question is, you know, I'm also an educator and an artist, and, you know, I've experimented with some of these AR tools. And one thing that really struck me is how much more like intensely focused they are, right, by the companies that make them on explicitly kind of not just commercial production, but for a very narrow kind of niche, yeah, right? If you compare them to traditional media, I'm not even talking about experimental tools, but like just like Adobe Premiere or something, right, is a much more open-ended tool, right? And it's marketed to a much wider range of, like, you know, some people make art with it, some people make, you know, more commercial content, and it's all okay. And with AR, it really feels like you're really working against kind of from the get-go, from the way the entire tool is designed and pushed and constrained. And I'm really impressed by what you guys were able to do with it. And I'm curious if there was any response to it from those kind of, you know, tech producers, sure, where it kind of made them reconsider, or if you're aware of anything going in those directions, because that would be amazing.
Sure. I mean, the truth is, we have no loyalty to any tech. Our loyalty is to journalism and storytelling. And so we're taking as much as we can on the framework of, I have no money. I only have 15 weeks. What can we do in that framework? Where do we have control to make this stuff? So we're an Adobe school. We edit the videos in Adobe Premiere, but Adobe has a different business model from Snapchat, right? Snapchat is a platform that is a particular demographic that skews younger. They played in news for a bit. I interviewed some of the staff that was there during when they covered news, and they found that news is a bummer, and a bummer for this demographic. They don't want much to do with it. So when I told them about the homeless project, they're like, that's cool. It's not gonna fly on our platform, which is fine, because that's not, I'm not using them as a viable solution. I'm using them to create an MVP that is not just for the classroom, but is something that could be shared at a wider audience. They are supportive verbally, and they invited us to attend the events, but it's a very different, they want to make your head an avocado, and which is totally cool, to throw up a rainbow. I'm clearly co-opting their product, which was not meant for our type of storytelling, but using it to do that, right? So there'll be different approaches. Now, there are other tools. There are Unity. There's a whole arms race for different types of AR and VR creation opportunities that are free. Some are, the barrier of entry is getting easier and easier, but how do I distribute it, right? The reporting is one thing, the capturing is another thing, the storytelling is another thing, the distribution is another thing. These are all pain points where, again, if it's not about, and if I'm not a big news organization protecting my brand, my goal is to inform my diverse communities. I have to test it out. So I'm willing to like compromise to make these partnerships, not compromise my ethics, but compromise my ability, right? If I did it in a Vive, it would be totally different experience, but only a handful of people will experience it. So those are the things that we're trying to figure out. And I don't view them that they're fighting. If I put them, they're apples and oranges. I just view them and I think I can use this one way and I can use this one this way. And I will say there are other Adobe products that are coming out, or competitors or hoping to be competitors with Adobe, that are creating products from photogrammetry to augmented reality publication. All that stuff is happening. Hope that answered that question a little bit. Yes,
Carla. Hi, Robert. I loved your presentation and I love the work that you're doing. I've done similar types of projects with students. I'm a professor as well, and I work with a class where we did a huge community-based augmented reality documentary, and we went in and documented a historically Black community near our campus. And it was a beautiful project and it worked great, but one thing that I found, we were constantly chasing the technology. Like, will we find one AR app that worked great, but then 2 months later it would be defunct, and then we had to find another one, and then there'll be a new one. So I feel like we're constantly chasing that. Have you had similar issues? And if so, what would you recommend, or how do you overcome that when apps are changing and software changes and it goes away and your whole project may be on one platform, you have a showing and they're no longer accessible? Like, how do you, I've done that.
And all of a sudden demo day and it dies because there's an update. Yeah, look, that is the reality of working in tech, and tech that is not mainstream and not established. In 2013, we augmented the downtown LA library, and we used a software called Junaio, which was created by this German company called Mataio. For AR nerds, they may know that is the company that Apple bought and made them disappear to incorporate into Apple, and a year later, AR Kit came out, Apple AR Kit. We did work with this design firm that took our content and made an iOS app, and then eventually that iOS app died because it never got updated with the new pushes. I am a daily journalism type of person. So my projects, I'm moving on to the next thing, moving on to the next thing. So I'm not okay with it, but I'm embraced that this stuff will die. We think that, oh, you put it online, it will live forever. That's not true, y'all. Don't pay your domain name, it will die, right? You redesign your website, that link is broken now. I work in that framework, but the framework in terms of chasing, one of the things that kind of happened, it was just an epiphany, was like, it's gonna take a while for Snapchat to disappear. Interviewing people at Snapchat, they get millions and millions of engagement every day. You may not think of them first. Now TikTok is the hot thing, and Instagram is probably gonna be inspired by TikTok and do some of that stuff too, which they have. But that company is still kicking and doing great stuff. And so it's gonna be a while before they disappear. We're working, we got approached by an engineer at Facebook who was like, why don't you use Spark AR? And I told them why we didn't at first. But we know that if we use Spark AR, we'll have a wider reach than Snapchat by going to publish into Facebook and publish into Instagram. Instagram, once we unlock that a bit more, it's gonna be even a wider reach. And it's gonna take a long time for Instagram and Facebook to die, right? You don't have to wait for those things to be established. For a lot of us who've been in this space, we've been dabbling. And even when those things fail, whether they die or it didn't work out, you're still learning a lot. And so from a professor point of view, those are incredible wins. We're wiring the brain. My goal is to wire the brain for my students to say, shit, I don't know, but let's find out. That is like a lifelong learning experience that I want even reporters to experience. A source says no. Oh, does that mean the story's over? No, get to work. Try to find alternative records, documents, other sources, witnesses. That's problem solving that I think is really important. And even if the technology dies a year ago, the lessons are, or a year later, the lessons are still there. And so that's kind of how I've kind of grown comfortable with this. Yeah, I've got all these old cameras, like so old that they don't even work on your old phones, cameras that are littering my desk. My students joke that I should have opened a museum. You know, we have about 100 flip cams for those folks that remember the flip cam before your iPhone could record video. So yeah, just roll with it. The tricky part is if it costs money, and that's why I do things that don't cost money, because I don't got it. The Hot Pocket heiress money hasn't trickled down to me. So I gotta survive and find ways to do it.
Robert, there's some questions from the Q&A. Here's one. How did you find an audience or distribute or market the piece inside of Snapchat?
That's a great question. And so one of the things, for full disclosure, is my metric for success is different metric for success for, say, a local newspaper, where they have to justify how many page views or how many people engage with it. For me, I have to prove it's viable and show it to people. So how many people click on it doesn't matter to me. It could be my students and their parents. But that's why we partner up with media organizations to amplify. Funny thing with Snapchat, they had pulled back from media partnerships. So a lot of media partners, I would say, like, even with Al Jazeera, I was like, you guys have an incredible Al Jazeera experience, presence on Snapchat. Do you want this stuff? And they didn't understand. A lot of media companies don't know what the ROI is on that homeless lens. How do you even promote that in Snapchat? And actually, when we first put that out, lenses were brand new. And so the OLCs, the original lens creators, those were the ones who would get the spotlight. I don't know how you can, well, now you can promote. Snapchat has really embraced the lenses, Instagram as well, where you can socially share. You can take a selfie on Instagram and it's tagged what lens you use so people can share it socially that way. So that's one way of doing it. For our products or our experiences aren't necessarily in that framework, because, you know, in order for them to work that way, the story has to be super self-contained. And often they're not yet super self-contained. So you need the text story or the video story about homelessness, and now go step in Angie's car, stuff like that. So we find that kind of balance and partnership. But yeah, that's one of those tricks. At some point, there will be the Google of AR lenses that say, I'm looking for a lens about homelessness, and maybe that's where they'll find it, right?
Great. How long do another question, how long do the students have on some of these projects to research and make the work?
Oh man. So it's 15-week semester. Week 1, I talk about the class and expectations. Week 2, I introduce the technology, because a lot of them can barely spell AR or VR. And it is constantly changing. Again, we don't know, but let's find out. Depending on the partnership or the topic, you know, week 3, week 4, we bring them an expert on the community, on the topic, to talk to the class, to offer a master class. And then the students start to process how to apply this. And so week 4, week 5, we often pitch stories. That's if we're doing the spring class where we're doing our own stories. But by week 5, 6, if we're doing a partnership, we do a training, and then the participants pitch the stories, and then we go there. So the whole thing, soup to nuts, is aimed to be at 15 weeks. Sometimes we do that. Very often, because of post-production stuff, it trickles into the following semester or a couple weeks into the summer. I try to have some sort of event to kind of debut this stuff, to help amplify it. But you know, for the youth in foster care, COVID really screwed up our partnership with PBS SoCal, so they had to focus on something else. The foster care stuff took a back seat. But then we did a virtual event for Juneteenth on campus, or virtually on campus, with Peace for Kids, to talk about that stuff. What I want, I mean, one incredible benefit is, as a journalist, I'm not an advocate. I'm telling you stories, and I want you to reach your own conclusions. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but these nonprofits can use these stories to amplify and educate, and maybe use it for fundraising. I'm okay with that. We're not doing a commercial. We're not doing propaganda. We're doing it on our terms editorially. So if that aligns to bring awareness to homelessness, or to bring awareness to cultural burnings, then that's great. That's an additional positive to that.
Great. So we have another question from Hamidreza Nasiri. She says, thank you so much. This was so amazing. I might have missed it, but could you tell us more about the 360 cameras you provided to people to create their own videos? I'm curious what 360 cameras you think are best for having community storytelling workshops.
Sure. The best are the cheapest. Cheapest and good enough. That's the threshold that you want. When they reach that sweet spot. And the Samsung Gear cameras, even the first one, the eyeball, is really great, but it only works for Android. So the 2017 version of the Samsung Gear works for iOS and Android. At the time, there was a moment that were under $100. Now they're back up to almost $200, but maybe on eBay you can get them for much cheaper. That might be my backup plan if I can't get any more from Samsung. Those are the best ones to give away. There are other cameras out there now that work for iOS and Android that by now might be affordable. The Insta360 One was a really great camera. Then the One X has come out. I would say there are different types of cameras for different goals, right? For me to afford to give away, I got to go with older used ones that are reliable. And then for us to produce, the camera that we use a lot now is the GoPro Max, which self-stitches. Because just because you film stuff, there's still post-production stuff. With the Samsung, you can stitch together via the app where the stitch line, the line where the cameras come together, is really obnoxious. So we take that raw footage and we stitch it through a third-party software called Mystica VR, done by the company SGO. They do the stitching software, so we use that and it's a better quality. So each camera has some pluses and minuses and gives you headaches here and there, but the camera we go to right now is the GoPro Max and the Insta360 One X. That's my camera I carry with me when I travel. It's super fantastic with mobile, social, does some really cool effects, really quick. Just for a human being, a citizen playing and being a tourist, that's a really fantastic camera. But if you want to do a documentary video production, I would go with the GoPro, even the Fusion, which has dropped in price.
Great. Claudia?
Hi, Robert. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. I was wondering how you connected with and cultivated relationships with the subjects and participants of who were in the projects that you mentioned, and what were their reactions to their stories being told using emerging media?
I wish I could say that it was all a master plan, that I had this all figured out, but I will tell you, after my colleague said, what the hell are you doing? And I came up with this idea, I was like, okay, is this even possible? I don't know, let's find out. We're in the middle of the semester. Actually, Annenberg as a school had decided to focus on homelessness that semester. They said, we have all these incredible students. What if we all focus on a theme and what stories can we produce? And I was like, all right, that's how we're doing it this year. We're doing homelessness. And it was the fall of that year. Coming grad students that were new. Oh, it looks like my headset just died. Hold on for 1 second. Let me swap into this. All right, hopefully you can still hear me. So what we ended up doing was the students found it difficult to gain access to folks on the street to really earn the credibility and trust, and understandably so. But we were okay connecting with nonprofits. They were understanding what we were trying to do. But if you tell people what this is, it's such an abstract thing, they don't understand it. It's like, what are you trying to do? They don't. I show demos and that starts to get them to understand. But I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this training, I need a location. And the Downtown Library were fantastic partners. I called them up and they were like, we love your crazy ideas, we'll host. And so I thought, great, we'll do the training at the library. I know the strong clientele is homeless that attend the library to use the internet, to use the restroom, to recharge their phones. So that was a logical hub. And when I was on the phone with them, they told me, come on down. We have an event every Tuesday, I forgot, first Tuesday of the month, where all these homeless services come together to help the clients, right? So I went and saw, the ticket clinic to help people fight tickets. Homeless folks are given tickets for ridiculous reasons. Of course, there was housing, mental services as well. USC Dental School was there to offer free dental services. There was even a voter registration because just because you're homeless and you don't have an address doesn't mean you can't vote. It's your right to vote. And so I went there and observed, and then I thought, okay, let's do this. I met a lot of people. I told them the idea. And then a month later, I went back and I showed up a little bit late as those who were offering services were in a big circle talking about what they were offering. And again, amazing life-changing services needed by these folks. And I was the last one to speak. And I said, oh man, you all have incredible services. I just have this, we're gonna do a training here next month where we wanna put these cameras in the hands of the community so they can tell their own stories on their own terms. And we wanna publish them and hopefully amplify them by Al Jazeera. And the room erupted in applause. And I was like, no, I have no services here, but it was just a refreshing approach to storytelling and collaboration. That was the first thing where I thought, oh, this might be kind of special. Or I'm in over my head, one of those things. And then we worked with Joan Howard. She is this amazing woman that works in the space. She knows everybody. She's like, Robert, I'm gonna get you this couple. They're wonderful. I'm gonna get you this person. And she and other nonprofits vetted, if you will, found participants that wanted to tell the story, right? You're not in the room. You weren't tricked to be in that room. I don't want you to be tricked into like, hey, we want to publish your story. So a couple wanted to be filmmakers, storytellers, things like that. And then that were reliable, that could make it there for those multiple days. We had to pay for gas for Angie to come from Venice Beach, which is on the other side of the world if you live in Los Angeles, to come to downtown, bus fare for some people. And by the end of the day, they were like, yes, I see the power of this technology and I have ideas. One idea they started to brainstorm was about the rats. I had no idea. Sadly, we couldn't pull off that story, but there are rats that are apparently screeching like bloody murder that keeps them up at night. But they, you know, there was a woman who was a musician, wanted to talk about her pursuit to be a musician while homeless, how art keeps this woman sane, how cooking and helping at a church keeps a young man named Brian sane, stuff like that. So it was on their terms. We always worked with them. What's the story you want to tell? And then, you know, at the end of day 2, right, I was like, I don't know how many people want to participate. Al Jazeera is only going to take a handful of stories. We'll publish a bunch of stories, but let's not overcommit. And I can afford 12 kits. Let's give out 10 just in case one person loses it, right? And I thought by the end of the training, I'll ask who wants to go all the way. We'll publish your stories. You know, you can walk away and say, Hernandez, your jokes were horrible, but thanks for the camera, I'm out. Or you can say, I do want to work with JOVRNALISM, or you can say, I want to work with JOVRNALISM and try to get my story published with Al Jazeera. I thought 4 people would go all the way. All 10 of them did it. And I was like, oh crap. They all want in. And so we pulled it off. A couple people disappeared just for a variety of reasons, but we published, JOVRNALISM published 7 stories. Al Jazeera, actually we did, I think 8 stories because we did additional stories outside of the training. And Al Jazeera published 4. And it was phenomenal. Al Jazeera, Contrast had AJ Plus publish it on their Facebook page, and that got a collective more than 2 million views. And so for folks who, you know, Daisy and her boyfriend to share their life, to go out there, it's a wonderful thing, like to be heard. I mean, you got to think about this. These communities are underserved, underrepresented, and when they're put in the media, that's usually they're bad, they're a problem, they're a victim, something not positive. And so for them to tell their stories on their terms and to be heard and seen as human beings, again, just living their life, it goes, again, I wish I was thinking, I knew it was going to be a win for everybody, right? The media is going to get cool content. The students are going to get great knowledge and experience. The participants are getting cameras at the very least. I try to go for my projects for multi-layered wins. And then these things exceed even what I could imagine, just winning awards. We had a debut at the library. We had a Saturday event where the participants and the students were on stage to talk about their projects and their experiences, their ups and downs. Like, give them the spotlight, because we ignore them, let alone share the spotlight with them. We don't do that. So it changed. This class was one class, now it is 3 classes. So every fall we work with underserved, underrepresented. Every spring we go to a location and do a story like that. So.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much, Robert. It's really inspiring, wonderful work. And thank you everyone for being here. And we hope you will join us next week when we have Caitlin Robinson, same time, 2 o'clock, noon on Tuesdays. See you next week. Thank you.